everybody, I'm Steph Hodge with BoardGameGeek, here today joined with Spencer from Just Games, and we get to look at Peaky Blinders under new management. How you doing, Spencer?
Doing very good, and I'm going to go ahead and apologize. We pulled a fast one on you. So we are showing the game for Just Games, but I'm actually with Asmodee USA, who is releasing it here in the US. So
Excellent.
I just didn't want anyone at Just Games to be like, that guy doesn't work for us. But they weren't able to make it because they're on the other side of the pond. It's a little late for them. So we decided to step in to show this product. So this is Peaky Blinders under new management, and it is a licensed product. So it is a licensed product from the Netflix show, which kind of has I would argue, a pretty strong cult following. It's not as big as every other show or some of the bigger shows on Netflix. It's bigger than other shows on Netflix, but it is not as big as some of the biggest shows on Netflix. But it is a quality, very quality, like crime drama that is also a period piece. It takes place in like 1919 after World War I in London. And it is about a kind of small gang of a small gang that's trying to kind of gather power, and then eventually, as the show goes on, kind of become legitimate businessmen by rolling the resources and money and networking that they've done into legitimate business. So it's kind of I would argue is like a pretty typical crime story, but it's just so beautifully shot. It's really well written, and it has a very strong fan base. And this game pays a lot of homage to what the fans really love about the game, not only from what you will be doing in the game, but also, as you can see here, this kind of like throwback graphic design that looks very retro, but also got a little bit of like modern tint to it. The idea being that this game, and I think that the designers did a really good job in kind of building a game that has a few mechanisms that are more modern, but also feels like something that might have come out of the 1920s. That it has a few gameplay elements that do feel a bit retro and are kind of designed to make you feel like this is something that the characters in Peaky Blinders would have been playing, while also still having some light worker placement elements that are, I think, more modern and gamery gamers will appreciate. But I will say, since we are discussing this with the BoardGameGeek audience, that this is a game that is meant to kind of be a gateway. It is meant to be something that if you are a big, huge Peaky Blinders fan and you want to get a Peaky Blinders game because you're kind of interested in board games, but you really love the show, it's approachable and easy enough for people who are kind of new to the hobby, while also offering a few elements that are a little bit bluffing, a little bit worker placement-y, that players who are familiar with the hobby, who play a lot of games, can find some ways to kind of play the game while also kind of playing the other players. So there is kind of a bluffy element in there. And that is my extremely long-winded introduction to Peaky Blinders under new management.
So I guess my first question is, since I haven't seen the show, will the theme still come through? Like, will I want to go see the show after I play this, do you think?
So I think it does a good job of kind of introducing some of what you're doing. Number one, in particular, the show hitches a lot on horse races and kind of the gambling business around horse races. And so the game has a horse race mini game that kind of happens in between what I would call full sets of rounds. So there's each round, we go to these different parts of London and we do crimes because we're gangs and we're criminals. And then after we've done that 4 times and gone to different areas where we've collected different resources, we've powered up our gang in different ways, we will actually go to a derby, and the derby race will happen. And based on what you've done in some of the rounds leading up to that, you might have some bonuses, or you might have some minuses, and it might make the race a bit harder for you to win. And that does kind of deal with something you see in the show where they're trying to kind of fix and rig these horse races a little bit. They're kind of trying to get their favorite horse out in front so that they're kind of guaranteed a return on their investment gambling, so that they're going to, again, generate that income And that's one aspect of the criminal empire that they're building, but it is a big aspect of the show that is kind of paid here in this mini game that happens in between these sets of 4 rounds.
Wow, that sounds pretty cool. So can you give me a little bit of general information? Like, how many people does this play, and what? So like the general mechanics, you kind of gave us a little taste, but maybe then we could jump into a round. But
yeah, sure. So the game is for 2 to 4 players, and I plays best, I would say, at 3 or 4. And it is, the way the game works is that you, at the start of the game, every player will be given 2 mission cards, and then what they call a control mission card. So you'll have 3 missions total. And the mission cards are kind of like thematically telling you what kind of crimes your gangs are getting into. So maybe you're like the guys that are running guns, or maybe you're the gang's perfect. Yes, thank you, Lincoln. Maybe you're like a chop shop that's collecting car parts to kind of, and you can see this beautiful, like, you notice that the charisma, this cracked me up when I looked at this. The charisma is just alcohol. I thought that was very interesting choice, but it's super accurate to the show. There's a lot of rum and whiskey being drunk in the show. So you will have these kind of different missions that Lincoln's pulled out here. And those are the types of things you'll need to complete. And you do need to complete all 3 of your missions to actually win the game. So it's the first person to complete all 3. And it is a complete and reveal. And then the game ends immediately. There's no last round for everybody or anything like that. It is, I've completed my missions. I'm revealing that I've completed my missions, and the game ends. Those missions that Lincoln showed a second ago that have like resource, or yes, perfect. Like these are like resources or like gang attributes that you can level up. Those are the standard missions. Now there's also a set of cards called the control missions. And those are the cards with like the black borders in the top left corner. Yeah, just grab 1 or 2 of those. That's perfect. And if you'll throw those down, you'll see that those say control Birmingham City, control Small Heath. And those are the different locations that you'll visit while you play the game. And so everybody will have one of those. And there are only 4 of those in the game, so they do not overlap. So there's no way that Lincoln or Steph and I are all going to have the same control. We're always going to have our own control. And so what's interesting about that is that when you get your 3 missions, you will select one of your 3 to play face up in front of you that the entire table gets to know. And that's kind of where you start judging, well, do I want them to know what area of town I'm looking to control, or do I want them to know what type of resource I'm gonna be collecting, or how I'm going to be leveling my gang up? There is a little bit, and that's what I was saying, is why the game does mechanically have some very entry-level style mechanics. That part of the game can be played a bit meta for people who are a bit more ingrained in the hobby, where you're trying to decide how much information you're going to give away at the start of the game. So what we can do is, after you've taken your missions and shown them, you would normally have a round where we would start with the first player, and we've got the red player there. So why don't we kind of walk through a round and talk about what you're doing on the round? Does that work?
Sounds great.
Okay. So what we'll do is, the first place we would visit is Small Heathrow in that top left corner. And this is kind of worker placement-esque. The first player, and we'll talk about how you get to be a first player in a second here. The first player at each round will take one of their henchmen, which is one of the 3 miniatures they have available to them. So they have 4 miniatures. One is the horse. The horse goes onto the derby at the bottom. And then, yes, perfect. And I'll go there. Thank you, Lincoln. And the red will actually go into the red spot. You see that 1 spot down on there. And yep, perfect. And then the other 3 are the rum glass and the revolver, and then the timepiece. And those are the 3. So let's go ahead and just say, for the sake of fun, you would take the revolver and place it onto that first portion next to that horse in the top left corner there of Small Heathrow. So what that does is, you're claiming that location. When after everyone's placed, we will start removing. And when we remove, we will score what we earn for placing in that location. And each henchman type scores differently. So the gun, when you remove it, you'll roll a D8 to figure out how many resources you're going to get. And when you roll that D8, you'll get a result. And with the gun, you're always bound to get a good result. It's always going to give you something. At 1 through 5, it's going to give you 2 rewards. And that means in this case, you would get 2 horsepower to add to your gang. And if you see there's a horse icon in the middle top of that red player board. And so if you were to roll that, you'd add these 2 +1. Yes, sir. If you add 2 +1 tokens there, that means your horse is now that much faster than it was. And maybe it's because you've been feeding it better grains, you've been training it better, or maybe you've gone out and stolen a faster horse. Thematically, you're making your horse better for the race. But the thing with the gun is, after it comes off the board and you roll and you get your 2, the gun always results in some amount of suspicion. The theme being that your gun is your muscle. It's your henchmen who go in and just beat people up and take what they want. So if you rolled like a 5, you get those 2 rewards, but then you would also get 1 suspicion. Okay, and you would get 1 suspicion. We're going to assume that was a 5. And you get 1 suspicion. So if you see Lincoln, thanks a lot. If you see the red bar down there at the bottom of the board, ticket up 1. So it'll go up 1. And so with the muscle, anytime you do anything, even though you're always guaranteed to get something in return, you're pushing your suspicion up. The coppers are kind of learning about this group. And so the gun is always good. As Zardoz fans know, the gun will always give you something good, but it will also have an issue of eventually you could get arrested. And when you get arrested, the gun comes off the board and goes into that red space down in prison. And then you have to break them out or bail them out with money. And so you could potentially lose your henchman that always guarantees a good result. But you also will not have you won't be generating suspicion, because the other 2 henchmen that we'll talk about don't generate suspicion. Only the muscle does. So the charisma on it, a 1 through 5 give you nothing, but a 6 and above will give you 3 rewards. So it's kind of like your glass cannon. It's your really risky play. You're most likely not going to get something, but when you do get something, you get a lot of it. And then your timepiece is a less risky, better spread, but not quite as powerful as the strength. So 1 through 5 gives you 1 reward, and then 6 through 9 gives you 2 reward, and then 10 plus will give you 3 rewards. So it's a safe play. There's no suspicion, but it is kind of a safer play, but it doesn't give you those bigger rewards. Now, the die is a D8. I didn't mention this earlier. The die is a D8. And so this goes back into, if you see where you have the gun, the kind of whiskey glass, and the timepiece on your player board, you'll notice that they have those squares underneath them. So at certain locations around the board, you can invest in strengthening those henchmen. And so what's really cool, perfect, thank you so much, Lincoln. As you can see there, the game does give you here's what you get rewarded for when you roll the die. So the die is a D8. Base-wise, these things are not going to do huge rewards for you, but as you strengthen them, they become better for you, kind of mitigating bad rolls for you to be able to catch up. And what's cool is with the strength, I think this is a really clever thing, is you can drop a lot of extra points into strength, but it also means you're going to be hitting a ton of suspicion every time you roll. So it's kind of like you get these muscles that are always getting arrested. These are the guys who just go out and do something really bad and get arrested immediately. And then to bail them out, you have to pay cash, which is pretty expensive. Actually, Lincoln, if you pull that down too, so that we get the top section, so there you can see leadership and horsepower. And this is going back to the horsepower affects how the horse performs during the race. And then the fortune is another way to mitigate dice rolls. You spend 1 fortune token to just add 1 to a die roll. So if you rolled a 5, but you really needed a 6, you can spend 1. And then the leadership is another thing that you can kind of power up in your gang. And that determines who the first player is when you go into new zones. And as I mentioned earlier, having that first pick is really powerful, because getting the resources you need to complete your missions or to level up your gang in the way you need for the race that's coming up is really important to the game, right? So as you kind of roll the die and start leveling things up, you're kind of going well, it might be better for me to start investing in leadership this next time we go around, because I'm never first and I really need to start being first. So if actually we'll go back to the map again real quick so we can move off of this board. One thing that's interesting that is, again, kind of one of the things this game does that I think is actually quite clever, even though it is, again, simplified rules of place here, remove at the end of the round, everyone's replaced, we'll start removing our henchmen, rolling the dice to see what we get, what rewards we get, and building out our gang or getting cash and stuff like that. What is interesting is that a lot of these rewards overlap, or they kind of help develop a kind of rolling victory. So it's interesting that, like, you might go, okay, I haven't put any points into my leadership, so I'm not ever first. But two of the things I need to win the game are actually in my let's say Birmingham City, right? And what's interesting about that is, like, if you're like, okay, well, next time I'd really like to be first in Birmingham. Well, after we've done the part where we place the miniatures and we remove them and we roll and get our rewards, there is what we call the open game section. And the open game section allows you to do things like any items that you have that you've collected during the previous rounds that you don't want, you can sell them into the little market that's at the bottom there and gain some cash back. Other players can buy them, which allows players to, kind of, oh, I needed that car part that got taken last round. Well, I can buy it out of the market because you just sold it because you didn't need it. It's kind of like the black market. But the other thing you can do is you can buy you can spend money to buy control points, which are the little yellow wooden tokens. And in the bottom right corner of each section, you'll see that there's that control location. And when you drop those points into those control locations, so let's say we're going to drop the yellow one into Birmingham City there. So you just drop it into the top of, right there. Perfect. Thank you, Lincoln. That automatically supersedes anybody who has leadership points. When you come into Birmingham, yellow owns it. So it doesn't matter if you've got the most leadership points in the game. You come into this zone, and yellow is going to be the first to place the token, and then we go clockwise because you've invested. Now, this goes back. Everybody is going to have to control fully all 4 of their control points. Will need to be in one city to win the game. Everybody will have a control card. So by investing in that, you're kind of communicating to the other players, maybe I need this one to win. So another player might put their control point there just to block a win for you, to make it start slowing you down as you're rolling towards victory. And that's where, again, at the beginning of the game, trying to decide which of my mission cards am I going to show has a little bit more strategy than it seems like the first time you play the game. The second time you play, you're like, oh, right. I played last time, and because I showed everybody right off the bat that I wanted to control Birmingham, everyone was fighting over Birmingham, and it was making it really hard for me to win. Whereas, like, you can put points into other zones, and then at the end of the game go, oh, I'm moving this point into Birmingham, and now I control Birmingham. That's the last thing I needed to do to win. There's also, since we're talking about the control, there's also the ability to do conflict, which is the bottom row of each zone has a conflict. And if you put a miniature there, you don't roll. Yeah, it's perfect. Thank you, Lincoln. You don't get any reward for taking it off. You don't roll the die. If there's nobody controlling that zone, you automatically get either a defense or offense card, and they're shuffled together. They're called conflict cards. So those are the blue and red bordered cards at the top of there. And they give you different bonuses when you actually do get into conflict. And what actual conflict looks like, and I'll go ahead and let Lincoln grab those so we can kind of see what those look like up close. So you can see increase all your dice roll results by 1 in the upcoming round. What you will do is in the open game state, so it's after there's that round after where we've kind of pulled all the miniatures off and we do the open game state, you will have the ability to play one of these cards to get the bonus for the next round. So you get those for playing into conflict zones without anybody in control. But if there is somebody in control of that zone, you actually engage in a conflict. And during that, you will select the henchman type that you've used, whether it be intelligence or charisma or strength. That is the number of bonuses you will add to your roll. So you might roll a 4 and you've got a 4 in strength and you've used your strength mini. And so you've got a total of 8. And then your person you're playing against will have to use their strength result as well too. So the miniature that you decide to put on that zone is kind of a counterplay based on the way the other members who are controlling that zone have built their gang. And if you do a super powerful overroll of 15 plus, the person that you've beaten has to remove all of their leadership points. So there's times where, like, because you've come in and really muscled them out, it resets the leadership. It causes, thematically, it's like people start doubting the leadership's ability, right? And so they lose their leadership points. And it kind of resets the game in the middle of the game for them, because they're like, oh, now I have to start buying, I need to start building up my leadership again, but I also need to start buying control into the zone so that I get first pick. So finally, the last thing we'll talk about is, after you've done 4 rounds, you've gone to every city, you've built up your gang a little bit, you'll do the derby at the bottom. And the way that the derby at the bottom works is the gangs will look at their horsepower. And in this case, red has 2. So red will automatically start 2 spaces ahead than yellow.
Oh.
So you would move those 2 spaces ahead. Now every gang will take a turn rolling the race die, which is the D6 that has the white there. And if you just throw that on, perfect. When you throw that on camera, thank you. You can see it just gives you a number of spaces. Ooh. So it's I believe it's 1 to 3 balanced, and I think it's mostly 1s, a couple 2s, and then 1 3. I think, if I remember correctly. There's 2 3s. Okay, so there's all right. There might be 3 3s. So there's the deal is the first person to cross the 2 3s. Okay, thank you, Lincoln. The first person to cross the finish line wins. And what you win is, when everybody gets into the derby, everybody must bid $1. And you then win all the dollars that were bid. If somebody, for some reason, doesn't have $1 to bid, they spent all their money, they still must participate. But if they win, they don't get any money. They just basically ruined it for everybody else. And the money goes back into the bank. And so when you win, you get all the money that was bid, but you also get money based on another type of icon that we haven't talked about yet, which is the number of members in your gang. And that's just another resource you can collect in one of the cities. In fact, I think it's the first city. You go to the pub, you chat up the guys at the pub, and you generate more members in your gang. And so that number generates more cash. And again, the cash is used to buy items that are for sale out of the market. It's also used to bail out your strength when they've gotten into trouble. So this kind of goes back into, as I was mentioning before, everything kind of plays off of itself. You may not need cash to win. You may not need a ton of things to buy a ton of things, but cash helps you get that really strong minion out of jail when it goes to jail. And if you built that minion to win rolls consecutively, then they will go to jail pretty regularly. So there's kind of interlinked combinations on when you need those cash and when you need like car parts and stuff. The game has a pretty tight economy that weaves into itself. But as you can see, mechanically, the game is a lot of like pressing your luck and like light worker placement with rolling to find out what you get, and then looking ahead at what you've got and going, oh, I need to spend more into leadership or more into horsepower because I really lost that last derby last time and I got to go faster this next time. So.
Nice.
Hope that gives a good
that definitely has it has a very thematic feeling. And I don't even know the show, but I already understand the show from your explanations. That's very good. But I already know if I were to play this, I know is I would go for the whiskey strategy and just go for the 6 or higher every time.
I always, just in life as a golden rule, I go with the whiskey strategy. That is the one that I tend to default to.
I'm just gonna take my chances and hope for the best kind of situation. So this definitely seems like a light worker placement game as you described earlier. And I was just informed that this is just on Netflix recently, so we can go watch it. But it debuted in the Netherlands originally, which is where this was designed, I think, right?
Yes, I believe that is correct. And I believe that is correct. I've only ever seen the show through BBC America and Netflix. So through one of those two sources, I've seen it, and that is right. It is all on Netflix now, and it is a full saga. They did the full 5 seasons. They've completed their story. Oh, wow. There's no loose thread. So if you want to get into it and watch it, you can. And the game is available tomorrow. So binge the show this weekend. Pick it up at a friendly local game store on Monday.
So does that mean there might be expansions for this? Like,
there could be. Anything is possible. I know that the team that built the game really loves the show, and they have a lot of ideas. So even if there aren't expansions, I wouldn't be surprised if you see some other Peaky Blinders products coming from them. That's not some sort of clever spoiler. I just know that they have a passion for the product and for the brand, and that they really enjoyed making this game. So they may continue to dabble in this IP moving forward.
Excellent. So you said it's available tomorrow. Is there anything else we need to know about Peaky Blinders in the last minute that we have?
No, I think that's it. I hope people will check out the show, and then also take a look at the game on BGG, and give it a thumbs up if they're interested in it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Spencer. You've been a pleasure for joining me and telling me all about Peaky Blinders.
Well, thank you all for doing this, and we hope to see you in person soon.